Tonight is sort of well, it is a continuance of what we did last Thursday night. You all got the chance to see and touch and feel what charts are all about. I think it was, from what I gathered, everybody had a good time going through and learning about the charts. I know Jim got totally confused, because, as he normally does every year, trying to find things.
John, I'm 81. Give me a break.
Yeah,
I got here tonight, didn't
and
I?
you're sinking fast. Good thing you have a life jacket on.
I had to call him back. He's walking across the bridge, so I had to call him back.
Yeah. So we're going to kind of continue with that, except now we're going to take another step, and that is we're going to learn how to actually plot a course and do a number of calculations with that course. So if you were not to have electronics, or your electronics failed on you, you could safely navigate from here to Fish Creek and back. And we're going to talk about distance, we're going to talk about speed and time, we're going to talk about plotting, and we're going to talk a little bit about the essentially the tools that you use to do this. You saw the tools last week. You'll get a chance to do all of this. When we're done with the words I've got, which I don't think is going to take much more than probably 35 minutes, we'll actually cut loose. Everybody will get a chart, and you're going to plot I think it's a five or six leg course around the Bay of Green Bay, leaving from Marinette-Menominee, and coming back to Menominee. And it actually is the M&M Yacht Club's 100-miler course. It's 6 legs, and it's quite fun. I think you're going to find it enjoyable, and everybody will work at your own pace. And if you don't finish tonight, you can take the chart home with you, and we'll go from there. So, any questions whatsoever up to this point in time? Whether it be this section on our charting or anything else, that we've got enough of the instructors here if anybody's got anything. If not, we'll start. We're going to start first of all with essentially measuring distance. And you all worked last week with the dividers. Shut down my light. Okay, grab my set here. We talked about measuring distance, and we talked about the fact that there's 2 ways to measure distance, and you will do both on this exercise later on. You will use statute miles, and you will use nautical miles. Remember, nautical miles is measured off the latitude scale on the left or right margins. And 1 minute of latitude equals 1 nautical mile. For statute miles, you'll actually have a scale of miles, much the way this is showing over here. This could also be the latitude scale, because it is over here on the right margin. Sometimes it'll be down here, like this. One of the things that will happen is, pull up the charts here. I use this probably frequently. There's your statute miles across the top. The latitude scale will be over here on this margin over here. And like they show here in this picture here, when you've got a long distance, and you'll have 2 cases of this in the 6 legs where the divider is not going to spread from point A to point B. So what essentially you do is essentially go and walk the dividers. Pick a distance that you think is about half the length, such as, in this case, 5 miles, and then start by coming off here. And let's say we want to go to this buoy up here. You're going to walk it like this, swing it around, and now you see I'm a little bit further. You pinch it down, and then you know you've gone 5 plus. And then when it comes time to do the measurement on the scale of miles or the latitude scale, you're going to come up here, and it's 5. If you put it at the 0, it obviously goes past 4. So come up to the 5 and read back, and essentially you're going to get about 4.6 plus the 5 you already walked off. So that's what's called walking a divider, and you're going to have to do that on 2 of the 6 legs this evening. To give you some sort of idea on really what's going to happen while I've got the chart up here, we're going to start here. We're going to go down to the west buoy off of Green Island. That'll be the first leg. Second leg will be going from this buoy to this buoy. And then the next one's a long one, where we're going to go from this buoy all the way up to this one over here, which is the Strawberry Channel right off of Fish Creek. The next leg is going to go from here up to this buoy here, and then we're going to go from there up to this buoy here, and then the real long leg is from there back home. That's the 6 legs that you're going to plot this evening, and there's going to be a few little tricks along the way that we're going to ask for you to do some things. So that's really what we're going to do later on. And you're going to be measuring distances. Is there any question on how to measure a distance? That's pretty straightforward. Okay, now let's bring in the math part of things. Before we do that, one of the things that we didn't talk about, and this is kind of old-fashioned, but I want to bring it up anyways. A lot of boats in the old days didn't have any way of measuring speed, which is one thing that's going to lead into the next discussion, and that is calculating speed, distance, and time. So what essentially we created were speed curves. And we did this when I worked at Marinette-Menominee and we did sea trials. Essentially, we had a measured distance. There were a couple of them around the Bay of Green Bay. One in particular, we had a surveyor measure the distance from the Menominee River Light over to the breakwater at the yacht, or at the Menominee Yacht Harbor. And that distance was measured, and what we would do with the smaller boats that Marinette-Menominee built, we'd run that course one way at 1 RPM and run it back at the same RPM, so that way you would take into account any current or drift, average the two at various RPMs. And then you could calculate the speed, and then essentially you would know what your speed was for whatever RPM. So at 2,000 RPM, your speed was basically 15 knots. This was what was called a speed curve. It's still done with the large commercial boats, because if their speedometer or something goes out, they need to know essentially what speed they're essentially running. They also, the captain can give the helmsman or the mate, I want 15 knots. Well, what is 15 knots? In this case, it's 2,000 RPM. So that leads us into the next thing, and that is, how do we calculate speed, distance, and time? And here's one of the few things that you're going to need to know with regards to some mathematics. Speed, distance, and time equation. 60 times the distance equals the speed times the time. And in some cases, now in the problem this evening, we're going to be doing a couple of variations of this. You're going to know the distance, because you're going to measure that with the divider. You're going to be told what speed you're running, so therefore you're going to want to know how much time it's going to take. So essentially, go back to those of you who have got good math background, you can make a little bit of work here. You go back and you know the time equals 60 times the distance divided by the speed. Where the distance is in miles, nautical miles, speed is in knots, and time is in minutes. Now, if the question asks, you're traveling in miles per hour, the distance has to be in statute miles, and the speed has to be in miles per hour. So don't mix these up. You can't have nautical miles as a distance and speed in miles per hour. They have to match. And you'll have a couple variations of both of those in the 6 legs that we'll plot later. This thing in the thing in the circle is kind of neat. For those that can't remember how to take this equation and derive at these, if you're looking for time, it's 60 times the distance divided by the speed. If you're looking for the speed, it's 60 times the distance divided by the time. And if you're looking for the distance, it's speed times time. Everybody following what we're doing here? Everybody up there?
Yeah.
Okay? 'Cause this is gonna play into things here later on. Before we do a couple of calculations, we're gonna confuse it even more. Everybody know the 24-hour clock. Anybody that's been in the service obviously knows that. I live myself by the 24-hour clock. Here's basically, the clock that we live by today. We start at midnight, go around to noon, and then we go to 1 o'clock up to midnight. That's what we live by today. On the 24-hour clock, we start at 2400 or 000 midnight, and we go all the way around to 1200, and then 1300 around to 2400. And it's always 4 digits, 0100, 0200, all the way around until you get to 1200, 1300. And it's very funny when people will say, all right, the Power Squadron is going to have a social gathering, we're going to get together at 1800 hours. We've had people show up at 8 o'clock at night, party's over. 8 o'clock is 6 o'clock in the evening. This is a little bit of getting used to. I think anybody that's bought a wristwatch today, you can set your wristwatch to whether you want a 24-hour clock or you want a regular clock. I've been working on 24-hour clock probably for, I don't know, most of my life. So you're going to need to know this, as well as how to calculate speed, distance, time. So, with that in mind, back up one. Time is on a 60-minute cycle. We are so accustomed in our mathematics today to work on a 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. And the decimal point doesn't play into this thing. You have to take into account that when you have 100 minutes, it's an hour and 40 minutes. Keep that in mind, because everybody's going to get caught up on that at one point or another. And to basically do that, we're going to do a little exercise here. Grab my pen. Let's see if everybody's been kind of watching. Okay. We're going to leave at 09. Excuse me, I have my glasses on, I can't see anything. Getting too old. 9:35. Everybody knows that that's 9:35 in the morning. And we're going to run for 40 minutes. When are we going to arrive, or better known as estimated time of arrival, ETA? It's another term that we use in the marine world. So if we left at 9:35 in the morning and we're going to run for 40 minutes, what time are we going to arrive? Here's your first chance at dealing with the 60-minute time. Somebody?
10:05.
10:05? Do I hear something other than 10:05? 10:05? 10:15? 10:15? Anything else?
Oh, 10:15.
Now, there's no O in front of 10. It is 10:15. Essentially, you've got 9:75. There's 60 minutes in an hour, so you're 15 minutes after the 60. Okay? Let's try another one here. We leave at 10:37, and we run for 2 hours and 50 minutes. What's our ETA? Now we get to thinking. I don't want the instructors to chime in here. They already know the answer. What do you got? 12 what?
27.
12:27? 12:27? Do I hear something else? Going?
Is it 1:27?
It's not right, she says. Let's, so if you add the minutes together, you're getting 87 minutes. And if you add the hours together, you're getting 1287. 87 is 27 minutes, so essentially you're 1327. You're only off by an hour. Follow so far? We're not done. We're going to do a bunch more of these. Because this is critical information. Whether you got electronics or no electronics, you need to know how to add time. Okay. Let's go. We're going to start. We're one of these sailors that likes to sail at night. We're going to leave at 23:30, which obviously is almost midnight. And we're going to run 2 hours and 15 minutes. What's our ETA? Somebody's got the answer. Oh, 1:45? Very good. But there's more to it. Next day. You've now gone into the next day. Okay? Let's throw you a curveball. We know we want to get there at 03:30 or 3:30 in the morning. We ran 5 hours and 15 minutes. At what time did we depart? I can see the wheels going here. Nobody's had math for many years, I can see. This is real stuff, and like I said, a lot of this, whether you've got electronics or not, you really need to know how to add, subtract time. Essentially, you're going to have to borrow an hour here, so you're going to make this 2 hours, and you're going to make this 90 minutes. Now you can subtract the 15 from 90, and we're going to get, actually we don't have to, sorry about that, I screwed up. We can already do that. We already know it's 30 minus 15 is 15. But how do we subtract 03, 5 hours? Well, we got to add an additional 24, which makes this 25, right? Or 27, excuse me, 27. 22:15, the previous day. Sorry about, my mind's going too fast. Everybody following how we got to that? Do one more of those. Let's see here.
Did you get it?
What's that?
A little bit.
Okay, let's see, part 16:30 ETA and 2 hours and 45 minutes. When's our depart time? Here's where we got to borrow. Make that a 5 and make that a 90. And now we can 45 and we can make it 13:45. Remember, 60 minutes in an hour, there's not 100 minutes like we're accustomed to working in normal math. Everybody with me? I know I can go through a whole bunch of examples, but you'll get a chance to do this and when we go through the problem. Okay. Next thing on the agenda, and that is okay. We talked about speed. We talked about time. Now we're going to talk about the course. And how do we take into account what I talked about the other day, and that is the errors that are affected with our compass, the variation, and hence the deviation, which you're not responsible for in this course. How do we take into account the fact that we all know that in Marinette-Menominee, we have an error in our compass of 4 degrees west. And everybody has a different error in their own boat caused by magnetic interference called deviation. Not responsible for in this course, but we basically tell you about it, so essentially you know what it's all about. So, we're going to do this little exercise. We're going to correct, essentially what we've got up here is when you plot the course tonight on the chart, you are always plotting what is known as the true course. You never plot anything but a true course on a chart. But then what you have to determine is from that true course, what are we going to steer on our compass? And we have to take into account the variation, which is the same for all of us, which we talked about last week, which is the angular difference between true north, the North Pole, and magnetic North Pole, which are some distance apart, which gives us this angular difference called variation. And in our area, we're fortunate because it's very little, it's only 4 degrees. And the course between true and compass is magnetic. But to get from magnetic to compass, we have to take into account this mysterious error called deviation. And everybody's boat is different. And it can be a little bit difficult to determine. And we went through the different things that can cause it, like electric windshield wipers, mics from VHF radios, additional speakers, refrigerators. In the olden days, beer and pop used to come in a metal can, not an aluminum can, and you'd put them in your refrigerator, and they would be inside of a magnetic field. You'd take the beer can out and set it up on the dashboard, you'd throw your compass off. And you actually can do it even to this day, sometimes with aluminum cans, but it's so minute you probably would not see it. And I saw in the early days, in the 60s, I was seeing metal cans throw a compass off by as much as 5 degrees after it had been sitting in the refrigerator for a period of time. So, you're going to calculate what the true course is on 6 legs tonight. And you're going to be asked to tell us what the magnetic course is. And in one of the legs, I'm going to actually give you this deviation because I want you to be able to see what this compass course is. How do we remember how to do this calculation? It's really simple. You're going to laugh when you see this. And this only happens in Chicago. That's how we all remembered it. Can dead men vote twice? And the arrows in the bottom essentially signify that when calculating compass course from a plotted true course, you're going to subtract easterly errors and add westerly errors. I told you last week that in our area, variation is 4 degrees west, which pretty much are giving away most of the answers for tonight's piloting problem. You're going to find out what the true course is, and you're going to be asked what the magnetic course is. You're going to plug in 4 west, so what's the magnetic course based upon this? 4 degrees less than true. If you were ever to essentially steer your boat, just go out of the harbor and start steering on a compass course, and you wanted to plot that for some reason, you're going to plot the true course, you're going to have to work it backwards. You would know what your deviation is, you would know what your variation is. You follow this, and it says add easterly, subtract westerly. So, it's very simple. I'm going to give you actually a sheet to work with. Here's an example. You plotted a course on the chart, 094. By the way, that is the practice the way you essentially record courses, it's always 3 digits. It's not 94 degrees, it's 094 degrees. You have 4 degrees east, subtract east, so you subtract it to get 090. You find that on a course of 90 degrees magnetic, your compass is off by 6 degrees to the west, and therefore it tells you to add 6. And basically vice versa if you were essentially have a compass course and wanted to plot the true course. Pretty straightforward. So, any questions so far? Here we go. We're gonna give it a try. Now you're all gonna get this. You're all gonna get a blank sheet like this. This is something we created. Here's a case where we're going to start out and we're going to plot a course of 050. And we're going to have a 3 degrees west variation. What is our magnetic course? 047. Do I hear something different? What does it say down here?
01 minus 1.
We're calculating from true to compass. Therefore, we're going from this to this. Subtract east, add west. 053. Now you look at your deviation chart. The deviation chart says for 50, for 45 degrees or thereabouts, you got 3 degrees west. So what are we going to steer our compass to be able to make 050? What's this answer going to be here? This is it right here.
3 east.
3 what?
3 degrees east.
No. 50 plus 3 is 53. And now we've got a westerly deviation, and we want to know what our compass is. So, 056. Essentially, true to compass, you add west, subtract east. We've got 347, and we've got 10 east. 337. You're following this. Again, when we're going from true to compass, the arrow tells us add west, subtract east. Deviation is 5 west. So what do we steer in our compass? 242. No, excuse me. 342. So you can see here, it doesn't take very much to change the direction of what you're going to steer. If you're trying to plot a course of 050, you've got to steer 56 on your compass. And what did I tell you last week? That 1 degree of error in 60 miles will put you off course by 1 mile. Bring it home to our locale here, from here to Fish Creek. If you're off by 1 degree, you're going to miss Fish Creek by 1/3 of a mile. That's how important this is. And I use the example that going from Copper Harbor to Isle Royale, 60 miles, and if you steer heavy to starboard by 1 degree, you're going to sail right on by Isle Royale and end up in Thunder Bay. You'll miss it because you're going to miss by 1 mile in 60 miles. If you're off by 2 degrees to the starboard, you're going to miss by 2 miles. You won't even see Isle Royale. You're just sailing right across Lake Superior. Okay, let's do something a little different here. Let's start over here. We leave the harbor here and we steer at 127 degrees. And we've got a really bad compass. It's off by 12 degrees east. What's our magnetic heading? Now this applies. 139, okay, that's good. And now we've got 5 degrees of easterly variation. So what are we going to plot on, if we wanted to take our course and plot it on a chart to see really what we're doing, what would we plot? Remember, true course is what you plot on a chart. 144, exactly. Pretty straightforward. Okay, let's try this again. 355. How many degrees in a circle? 360. Remember that. We got 15 degrees, really bad compass, 15 degrees east. What's our magnetic course? Very good. How'd you get that? 355 plus 15 equals 370. There's only 360 degrees in a circle, so you went 10 over. What are we going to plot? Somebody. You see what we're doing here? We're hovering around that 360 degree mark. So when you go over, you have to take that into account. When you come back, you got to likewise do the same thing. 267. Now we're getting close to one of the coasts. We got 16 degrees easterly variation. What is our magnetic heading? Again, now we're back going. 251. Subtract east, add west, and we got 10 west. And now what's our compass course? Very good. Last but not least, James Bond 007. We got 10 east. What's our magnetic heading? These girls up here in front know what they're doing. They aren't even using a calculator. That's pretty cool. Okay. 3 west. What's our compass heading? Is everybody following? I hope you get a chance to do this. I don't know. I mean, I could go on forever doing this. You've got this little handout here will be, you'll plug in your 6 courses, be straightforward. You're not going to be dealing with this column except in one case. One of the things that we've tried to do, and it's very, very difficult, and this might be leading to some of the confusion, when calculating from true to compass, we use this convention here that we subtract east and add west. The arrow is put on there for no other reason to say that we're going that direction on the paper. It has nothing to do with the direction you're steering. And this is how we got people tied up in knots in the early years of teaching this. Well, you're going from true to compass, therefore the arrow tells you to do this. All it is essentially is you're going across the paper this way, so you follow that convention, and likewise when you're across the paper, you follow that convention. It has nothing to do with the distance of what you're steering. It's just which direction across the paper you're going. This is, you'll all get a sheet like this to work off of, and if you just follow that, you'll have no problem. Okay.
Hey, John,
Yeah.
I'm not 100% on that. Like on the variation, how do you figure, is that already written down in the variation numbers?
Variation's what you pick. You pull off the chart. You pull this up here.
Oh.
It's right there. Magnetic variation is told to you right on the chart in the center of these large compass roses. And in the case of the problem we're going to be doing tonight, you're given that in the question. And in this case, it's 4 degrees for us. It's 4 degrees west for Marinette-Menominee. So that's a known commodity for all of us. It's the same for all of us. It varies based upon the location on the Earth. As I showed you last week, I mean, it could be 25 degrees on the East Coast and 25 degrees on the West Coast, but here we're sitting in the middle and we're very fortunate to have a very small variation.
I thought the variation was from beer cans and...
No, that's deviation. That's the D. And that's the one item that you're not really responsible for in this course, but I want you to be aware of it so that you take that into account.
Okay.
All right. Last but not least, and that is plotting the course. And this is okay. You're all going to do this. You all got parallel rules, and you've got a set of dividers, and you're going to use these pieces of instruments. Sharp pencil, I've got more of them up here. You don't mark on the chart with a ballpoint pen. It's cardinal sin. All right, to prove an example here, we're going to leave the breakwater down here, and we're going to go to this buoy over here. So we're going to leave from the center of the breakwater, and we're going to draw our line out here to this buoy. And we want to know what that course is. We're going to basically walk the parallel rule up until it touches the center of the compass rose, and essentially that's our direction right there. Now we can pull it off. Here's where I'm going to catch everybody tonight. Trust me, it happens. It's nothing to be ashamed of. All right, we're going from here to here. You see the line I drew through here? I wish I should have drawn it a little darker so you can see it. I apologize. Shoot. Essentially, you see what I did? I drew a parallel. I drew a parallel line. Now, the question is, it's either 64 degrees or it's 244 degrees. Which direction is it? Think about it. Pure logic. We're going from here to here. North is up here. What direction are we heading? We're not heading this way, so you don't read 244, you read 64. And I'll guarantee somebody is going to read this side and write that down, which basically means we're coming from this to here, and they're not going that way. We're going from here to here. So, convention says, on the top of the line, we write TC 064. And that's the first convention. Now, you're going to do your measurement, and you're going to come up with a distance. And on the bottom, essentially, we're going to run, right, D, in this case, 5.5. And you need to make sure you either write nautical miles or statute miles, SM or NM. And it will tell you, when you plot this, I've asked everybody to label the course and the speed and the distance, and then the S equals 15.0 K or knots. So that's essentially how you label a course, which you'll do 6 of. The top is TC, true course. Remember, that's all you'll ever plot on a chart is the true course. Your distance is below D, and your speed is usually given to you either in knots or in miles per hour.
You have DC5N, N?
No, it's D 5.5, and D is distance, 5.5 nautical miles. That you measured with your divider. And speed is 15.0 knots. Now, one last piece of information. We're right on time. One of the things that all boaters will encounter at one time or another, and that is, as they're cruising along, they see some sort of a mark off for one side or the other, be it a lighthouse, another buoy, a boat, whatever, and they're going, where is that boat, or where is that lighthouse? In this case, I think we're going to be looking at a lighthouse. So it's going to ask you, what's the bearing to that lighthouse? And let's put that lighthouse up here. We want to know at what time are we perpendicular, or perpendicular to that lighthouse. We know that our course is 064. Perpendicular, get your math cap on now. What's perpendicular to 64 degrees? What's a right angle to 60 degrees?
$120.
120, that's only 60 degrees. Plus 90 degrees, 154. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to lay this on the center here, and we're going to look for 154 degrees down here on the bottom, which is right there. And we're going to walk this. Oh shoot, screwed up on this side. We're still on the screen here. We're going to lay this on here like this. And we're going to walk this over until we find, essentially, at this point right here is a 90-degree angle from your old geometry class, and now we've taken a bearing on that lighthouse. And essentially, we could do a number of things. We could measure how far off we are by nature of essentially doing this, and we'll ask that on one of the legs to take a bearing. We're going to ask you at what time you're going to be at this point. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to measure this distance and apply 60 Street and determine at what time you're at that 90-degree angle. This is a very common practice in boating today, is taking a bearing. And a bearing is a 90-degree angle. In most cases, you could essentially you could be sitting here on your course and want to know what this bearing is, in which case your bearing would be something other than 90 degrees. But most of the time people want to know when they're basically perpendicular to that, which is a 90-degree bearing. And that's what we'll be doing one step this evening. But you need to kind of know some of these practices. What a bearing is, how to label a course, how to move the parallel rules. Is everybody following with the practices here on how to move the parallel rules, how to measure the distance, how to calculate speed, distance, time, and so forth? This is all what piloting is all about. It's very, very simple. And before I close and take a couple-minute break while we get things set up for the thing, I'm going to tell you a little story about how this really came to light for me back in the 70s. My dad, we bought our first big boat in 1965, and we boated out of Escanaba. We lived in Marquette at the time, and lo and behold, the first 2 years my dad had a big boat, we kept it at this marina. Little did I know how many years later I'd own it. We boated out of Escanaba because there wasn't any really places to keep it up in Lake Superior and Marquette. There were really no marinas up there until we finally moved it up in 1967. And with my parents' friends, they ended up starting to cruise with 4 other boats. And we became quite popular back in those days back on Lake Superior, to the point where we became known as the Ragtag Navy. Part of it is because every time we'd go out boating, we'd get into some sort of goofy situation, come in, and one of the other boats would have water inside the cabin from rain or splashing. So the first thing you do when you get to the dock is everybody take the sleeping bags out and lay them out to dry them out, and then we look like the Ragtag Navy. Well, we had an instance where we were coming back from Sault Ste. Marie back to Marquette, Michigan, and we picked up 2 additional boats. Another friend of my parents who had just bought a boat up in the Sioux wanted some help getting it back to Marquette. and another company, a couple from down around the Detroit area who'd never boated up on Lake Superior, and said, can we basically tag along with you? So my dad, being the experienced boater, one who I learned under, who was very instrumental in starting the Coast Guard Auxiliary across the UP. Both my mom and dad were very involved. They said, okay, we'll be the leader. Well, we took off and we got to infamous Whitefish Point, which is where everybody knows the Edmund Fitzgerald went down in the November gale storm. And we passed Whitefish Point. It was a reasonably decent day, and we started towards Marquette. We got about 8 miles past Whitefish Point. Fog came in so thick you couldn't see the other 6 boats. So all 7 of us are bobbing around. Everybody basically pulls back throttle, and we just sit there and we start talking to each other via radio, trying to basically regroup and decide what to do. Well, through the use of spotlights and horns, we got everybody very close together so we could see each other, and we weren't from here to the wall away from any one of us. And now the decision is, where do we go from here? We have 2 choices. We continue following the shore to a small harbor called Little Lake Harbor, which is probably the most picturesque harbor on the entire Great Lakes. It's absolutely beautiful. It's out in the middle of nowhere, north of Newberry, Michigan. Or we go back, go around Whitefish Point and into the harbor of refuge at Whitefish Point. The decision was, let's go back to Whitefish Point because it's only 7 miles. How do we get back there? In those days, no electronics. It was all dead reckoning. It was all doing this. And the boat that people bought in Sault Ste. Marie had a depth finder, and my dad's depth finder didn't work. And so the first question is, what kind of water are we in, so we can kind of look at the chart and figure out where we are. I called over, I said, how much water are we in? 12 feet. Well, that was the first shocker. Okay, we're awfully close to the beach. So my dad decided we're going to lead. We took out the chart, we plotted a course. There's a big bell buoy off of Whitefish Point. We're plotting a course for that bell buoy, which is 7 miles. And my dad's following the compass, and away we go. And all the boats line up right behind, just like the mother duck and all the baby ducks. And each person could see the person behind them. And away we went. And through speed, distance, and time, we knew when we should arrive at the bell buoy. And lo and behold, there it was, and the big bell's ringing. And the first thing my dad did was make a big circle, make sure all 6 boats were behind. And the next step was to plot a course due south for approximately 2 miles, and then do a 90-degree angle and head in, and we should come to the opening, much like the Menominee River, of the Whitefish Point Marina, which is just a little harbor reference. And this is where it got interesting. Remember now, we're in pea soup fog, and back in those days, it was all basically charts, dead reckoning. And we started on this course after my dad and we plotted it very quickly and said, okay, we've got to steer basically south of 180 degrees. We got going along. Up in front of my mom on the starboard side of the boat, my dad's driving from the port side, we had this light, as our whole back end was enclosed with canvas that we used to sit in the evening and everybody kind of gather around and whatnot. We had an electric light there so that when we were plugged in shore power, we could light the back cabin, or back deck. The light went on. And my dad told my mom, shut the light off. It's kind of bugging me. So she went up to shut the light off, and it didn't go off. And my dad said, in real choice words, shut the light off. So my mom pulls the cord out of the socket. Light still stayed on. And it's like, what is going on? First of all, it was 110 volt. There was no 110 volt on the boat. To this day, we don't know what happened. But something bigger than us was telling us that we were doing the right thing, because when we turned and made the right turn on the last leg, through dead reckoning, the fog lifted, the 7 of us scooted into the harbor, and the fog came back, and we sat there for 2 days. But it was dead reckoning that got us there through this type of stuff doing it, and that's where my eyes were open to navigation and what it's all about, and it's really cool stuff. It's an age-old art. It's still practiced day in, day out with electronics, and we say it time and time again, electronics does it all for us today, and it's wonderful, but what happens if it breaks? Then you got to rely on something. Mac, You've been on the water your whole life. Dead reckoning, right? It's done even with all your sophisticated electronics.
First time I went to Antarctica in 1981, 82, or 82, 83 rather. Well, all we had was satellite navigation, and it's not the same as GPS. The old sat nav, the satellite didn't come across the horizon at a certain number of degrees above the horizon. It was unusable for a fix. So we dead reckoned for days and days and days to get to Antarctica because we had no horizon, so we couldn't shoot a star fix or use a celestial navigation. We had no electronics that was working because we were out of range for Omega, which was supposed to be a worldwide thing. It was a big flop. And that's how we got to Antarctica, basically.
And then crossing the ocean is a whole different bottle of wax than crossing
Yeah.
space, because now
You got hundreds of miles, so if you're a degree off, you wind up in Argentina instead of Antarctica.
Plus you've got the curvature of the Earth that you have to deal with, much greater than we have to deal with here. So, okay, let's take 5 minutes. I'm going to give the charts and stuff out to everybody, and we can all go to work. Couple of pieces of